I think I'm starting to figure out what happened with this election. I've always been someone who has not had much faith, in voting in the electoral process. And so it's not very hard for me to believe that there was, monkey business going on and things like that. But I never thought that the way that, the reason why our elections were not meaningful was because there was just so much rampant cheating. I never thought that I would see this much this much fraud out in the open. I mean, to me, the fraud was not literal election fraud, but it was a fraud in the sense that you had a choice. Because the way I looked at it is that you always had the establishment that owned both candidates, and any outsiders or independent third-party folks who try to get on the ballot, they'd either try and quash them by not letting them on the ballot, or do all sorts of other things to make it very extremely difficult, which is how the laws are written, to get anyone who's not from one of the two major parties. And so that way, whoever the elites are in a given constituency, or in the case of a presidential race, the elites of the entire country, they just know that they have to buy off these two candidates, and then no matter who wins, they win. But 2020 is different in that, we have these, all of these, anomalies like, the signature verification stuff, the situation in Arizona where you have at least one witness saying that she was denied the right to view and observe the signature match verification of 34,000 ballots, which is much larger than the margin of victory. It's more than double the margin of victory for Biden in Arizona. We have this situation in Georgia, in Fulton County, where on camera you can see the election workers told the Republican observers, "Hey, we're done counting for the night. There was a water main break, which we heard on election night. So everybody go home." And then in the middle of the night, they just keep counting. This is a very obvious ploy. It's clear to anybody with eyes what they're doing there. And then we have the absurdly low rate of rejection for mail-in ballots across the country. I mean, I remember doing videos, a month or two before the election, talking about how, oh boy, with the Democrats pushing vote by mail so much, oh my, when there's going to be riots after the election because Trump might win because the Democrats sent in all these mail-in ballots, and the rate of rejection of mail-in ballots is like 5%. Easily 5% in a lot of these states on average. So if you have a bunch of, if you have a substantial portion of the electorate voting that way, well, then a bunch of Democrat ballots are going to get thrown out, and they're going to riot and say they were disenfranchised. And I also made the point that, considering these are a lot of these are going to be first-time mail-in ballot people, they're more likely to make mistakes, and so the rate of rejection might have been even higher, like 8 to 10%. And boy, was I wrong. It didn't even occur to me at the time that the signature match standards would just be thrown out the window, and they'd accept almost anything, because it would be so obvious if you did that that you were cheating, that you were just not throwing out anything, that you had no standards. But that's exactly what they did. And so to me, what all this says, I was trying to think today, like why? What's so important about this year, other than that you have Orange Hitler? But they call every Republican president, the media at least does, call every Republican president a racist, sexist, Nazi, whatever. They keep escalating the pejoratives they use. But it finally occurred to me that maybe just that many folks in the establishment really did see Trump as a threat, which I never really have. I mean, to me, it seems pretty clear that Trump is open to flattery. If the neocons or the neo-libs or whoever just wanted to go into his office and say, "Oh, gee, Mr. President, aren't you the greatest?" he would have gone along with whatever you wanted. I mean, he had Bolton there for quite a while. He's made terrible appointments. He's not he's not Pat Buchanan going in there with his ideology, or Ron Paul or somebody like that, who's totally intransigent and is principled and stands for something. I mean, Trump is a very malleable figure. But to me, what what this election, what seeing the level of fraud that was perpetrated in this election, the lack of integrity with which this election was carried out, the amount of stonewalling of any protestation or contestation of these election results, what this says to me is that a lot of people in positions of power throughout this country thought that maybe they did that they wouldn't be all right with Trump remaining in office. That what my usual idea about elections, that it doesn't matter because the establishment owns both sides, the elites and people in power, it's a big club, none of us are in it, and so when you've got two members of the club up there, it doesn't either side is going to be okay if one of them wins. So there's not that big of a reason to cheat for them, and there's not that big of a reason to vote for someone like me. But I guess that your establishment folks just really see Trump as that big of a threat, which I mean to me is kind of comical. But why else would they stoop to this level? Why else would they completely shred the American people's confidence, or at least a substantial portion of the American people's confidence in our electoral process? Because, like I said, I mean, I'm a pretty skeptical person when it comes to the U.S. government, things like that. But I mean, certainly I'm more skeptical of of the establishment and of our government than 99% of Americans. But I never thought that I just kind of took the electoral system for granted. I never thought that there was a big reason why they would have to cheat, and so I didn't think that there was a ton of cheating. I mean, obviously there's always some fraud, but it's a matter of could you really steal a presidential election? I mean, no, I did not. That's not something that I would have expected if you had asked me, in the abstract. And so, to me, the explanation is that the establishment does in their own way rig every election. They rig it by making sure that the only people you have to choose from are folks who will do their bidding. And this is a way in which they can sort of rig elections from the shadows by giving you this illusion of choice. But I guess they felt like, having Donald Trump as an option made it a real choice, and so therefore they had to be more overt in how they rigged the election. They had to come out and just actually, try and flood the market with, ballots for Biden. They had to stuff the ballot boxes through very, very sketchy means that are obviously questionable for anyone who's looking at this honestly. And they expose themselves in doing this. It does make it much more obvious to people that you don't really have much of a choice in elections. I mean, this is similar, again, to what U.S. intelligence does in other countries. Democracy means voting for who the U.S. establishment wants you to vote for, and if you vote for the wrong person, then the CIA is going to come in and declare your newly elected leader to be undemocratic, and they're going to restore democracy by staging some kind of a coup to overthrow the guy you just elected. I mean, this is a meme that's been going on, for a long time for anyone who's critical of U.S. foreign policy, but now we're seeing it in the domestic context to where Biden winning in one of the most in the most questionable election of my lifetime by far, that this win is being it's being touted as it's a win for democracy. I mean, this is it's the meme coming alive. Now, I don't think that the U.S. intelligence community by any standard are the ones who rigged the election. I don't think that it was so much a centralized plan. I think that the explanation given by Richard Barris and Robert Barnes is sufficient, and that is that you had Democratic legal teams suing in a bunch of states to lower the signature mesh standards. They sued to expand mail-in balloting. They sued to extend the voter registration dates to the most absurd point possible. They did all sorts of things like ballot harvesting. And so they made it as easy as possible for people to cheat. And so after, sort of setting the stage, then it was, just a matter of initiative for Democratic activist types to come in and try and cast fake ballots, trying to vote on behalf of dead people, trying to vote on behalf of people who otherwise didn't vote. I mean, this is why you have people showing up at the polling place saying, hey, I'm here to vote on election day, and the poll workers telling them, hey, you already voted by mail, so you can't vote again. That happens because somebody else voted in their name fraudulently, and because that signature was not checked to see if it matched. Or that, maybe the signature was checked, but it was checked to see if it matched the application. Rather than the application for the mail-in ballot, rather than the voter registration. So if someone fraudulently sends in an application for your mail-in ballot, the signature on the ballot that they cast is going to be that fraudulent signature is going to be compared against the fraudulent signature on the application. So it's not it's a pointless match, in other words. So overall, I think that this year represents an escalation in the decay of American democracy. I already thought that it was totally in shambles and was a joke to begin with, but now they're just adding insult to injury by they're not even giving us a false choice. They're giving us no choice at all. Is what it looks like to me. And keep in mind, they would not have done this to John McCain or Mitt Romney. Of course, those two would they lost because they were bad candidates. They didn't lose because the election was stolen from them. And now that these flimsy standards are in place, now that the precedent has been set for 2020, I don't see how the U.S. has legitimate elections moving forward. You think that they're going to try and undo any of this? I mean, this was all done specifically, this year. They lowered these standards. It's not like we had bad standards to begin with. I mean, it wasn't great in a lot of states, but this is a joke. But now this is going to be the new standard. Anything that's more stringent than this year, they're going to say that's voter suppression. They already did that. I mean, they were crying about voter suppression in 2018 in Georgia when they still have plenty of thousands of unqualified voters still on their voter rolls. Oh, and another thing that Barris and his research has been uncovering is that we're getting these weird anomalies where people that he's finding people whose ballots were quote canceled for administrative reasons, and it's not really sure. It's not really, there's not a specific reason given, like that they failed the signature match or something like that. And he's been calling some of these people to ask them, and from the ones that he's found is they've all voted for Trump, and they're in different states. He's finding this to where you have groups of people that all mail in their ballots, and at the same time in groups. And the ones who voted for Trump, magically their ballot was never received, but all their friends who voted for Biden, their ballots were received. I mean, to me, what that suggests is that, considering that government workers are overwhelmingly, Democrat supporters, if they are, open up your mail-in ballot when you mail it in and see that you voted for Orange Hitler, there's a decent chance that if they're particularly zealous about their anti-fascism, that they might just toss your ballot in the trash. And, again, if this is something that's going to become, regular practice, it's not really safe to mail in your ballot. I mean, no matter who you're voting for, because if the person who opens it decides that they don't want to count your ballot, into the trash you go. But again, just to reiterate, I do think this is all positive, because we didn't have our electoral system was not meaningful to begin with. Democracy in America does not mean much of anything, as far as I'm concerned. And so this stuff only serves to wake people up. Like I said, this is a much more overt way of rigging the election, because in my opinion, the elections already were rigged, because it was a false choice. But if they openly take away even that false choice and say, no, even this one choice that somehow slipped through our fingers that we didn't approve of, you can't vote for him. I mean, that's much more visible for people to see, and it makes it feel much more real to them. The fact that they don't run their own country, that, it's not a government of, for, and by the people and all that other nonsense that we get taught in school. Boy, I completely forgot to talk about Pearl Harbor. I should have done today's episode on Pearl Harbor. Oh well. If you gain anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.